Hello, my fellow chatterers and book lovers, and anyone else who's popped in because you're curious or you're lost. I'm Chatty and welcome to my channel, Chatty the Mad Chatter, where I'm going to be chatting away madly about another segmented study section for the Autumn Equinox as part of the Magical Readathon. The Magical Readathon is a readathon created by G from Book Roast, and all of the information that you need if you're feeling confused is in the description box, so you can go and have a little look and find out what it's all about. So for this readathon, it's like doing a magical study session. This is essentially our A-levels in the UK. I don't know what you'd call it in another country, but kind of like the next level up for your study sessions. So for the career that I would like, which is a dream walker, I have to read 3 books at O level, which means reading a book per prompt. 1 book at Q level, 1 at Q level, which means I have to read for 2 prompts, and 1 at D level, which means I have to read for 3. So altogether, I've got 8 books in order to become a dream walker. I've read 3 and we have 5 to go. So let's find out what I'm going to be doing today. Cheers everyone. It's a one shot, no edit, because I don't edit my videos because I have technical issues, which is why I can't do a proper vlog, so I'm doing it in segments. If you want to see any of my other stuff, like for example my TBR or the books that I've already read and discussed, I will leave a little playlist up here for all of the Magical Readathon content. So the 3rd book in my study journey, I had to read level O in Spells and Incantations. And for that we were studying the spell Recolor. And I had to read a book that was red, because I got red when I pulled out a pen from my box of pens. And for that I'm reading The Opposite of Butterfly Hunting by Ivana Lynch. It is a memoir, and under the dust jacket you can see it is beautifully red, as well as having a little bit of red here on the leaves and amongst the butterflies. So this was also the book that was my intimidating book. So I did not complete my June TBR. As a punishment, I had to read a book that intimidates me. I gave a choice of 6. I will leave a link to the video for that one as well. And this is one that won. Lots of people voted for this one because they were keen to know whether or not they should read it. After reading this, I can safely say, yes, you should. But before I go into this book, I just want to address a couple of things. This book is written by Ivana Lynch, and she is best well known for playing Luna Lovegood in the Harry Potter films. So I will be talking about Harry Potter and I will be talking about JK Rowling in this video. And I just want to address the elephant in the room before starting. If you are someone who finds this situation and those words a bit triggering and you do not want to continue watching, that is absolutely fine. You know what's best for you. Feel free to switch off and watch any of my other videos or whatever you like on YouTube. That is completely fine. So I just want to address the controversy. I cannot speak. The controversy surrounding JK Rowling and why I think it is important to address it. Sadly, as an articulate and educated woman and well-known figure, your words tend to have more weight with the general public, and her views on trans rights are well known. I have put a link in the description to 2 sites that I always direct people to if they want more information about this. One is Mermaids, which is a charity that supports young trans people and their families, and they responded to the essay that JK Rowling wrote about why she's being gender critical. And it's really respectful, and it goes through each point of the essay explaining how their views coincide and how they're different, and how certain bits are misinforming and also hurtful to the trans community. And the same goes for the second link that I've provided, which is a video by 2 YouTubers called Shaaba and Jamie. They are in a relationship together and they are also both doctorates in their real life. Jamie is a trans man and he is he's a doctoral researcher in the field of transgender well-being and development. So they have a lot of facts. They explore, again, each point in the essay. They are so clear, they are so open, And again, it is very respectful, and I think it is such a good video, and it's so good at looking through each point and providing you with information about why trans people feel hurt by this and why misinformation can be really detrimental to the trans community. So I highly recommend, if you haven't heard of this or if you aren't sure what you're supposed to think, please do go and look those out and read the facts, find out what this is all about. So I will always address this because I do just think it is so important. I think when you are a well-known figure, your words definitely have more weight. And 2 years on, people are still hurt by this. And one person giving their opinion about something sometimes opens the gate for people who are of that same opinion, but are a lot more aggressive and violent with it. And, you know, sadly, trans people do tend to be the most vulnerable people in our society, and they are abused and victimized and murdered. So it is really important that we have the correct information and we support the people who are the most vulnerable. And also, they're amazing, wonderful people who should just be allowed to live their lives. So, having dealt with the elephant has now left. It's eating a wonderful pile of buns. We don't need to worry about the elephant anymore. And I will get into the book after a good cup of tea, because I've already been talking for quite a while and my mouth is quite dry. That is a lot better. So yes, I definitely recommend this book. And although I was concerned about it being intimidating because I was worried about the subject matter, that it was going to kind of go in some dark places in terms of mental health and exploring the eating disorder, and I thought it was going to be really upsetting. It still is, but Ivana Lynch's narrative voice is so engaging, and the way she tells a story is so open and honest, and it's such a brilliant read about trying to understand what life has been like for her and what her experience of having an eating disorder has been like and how we can learn from that. And it was just she kind of varies between being really like sharp and pretty like brutally honest in her opinions of her family and things, and their thoughts on her, to also just being really like hilarious. So it's that really helped me kind of when reading. It was really engaging, because as well, like, memoirs are not something I read a huge amount of, so I sometimes can be like, oh, it's not my usual genre, it could be intimidating, but it was really engaging throughout. So I just want to, I've got 4 places marked in here that I want to read, because I feel that she just puts into words a lot better than what I could explain, just to kind of demonstrate why you should read this. So I think this must have been such a difficult but also healing book to write, like really having to delve back into her past, into all those kind of dark moments, and kind of pull out where they came from, how she was feeling, how her family was feeling, and what it was like for them. She definitely spoke a lot to her family whilst coming to write this book, and said it was really helpful to see their views as well, to get the other side as she was creating the story. And as someone who I have gone through sort of depression and anxiety, and I do remember some very awkward moments with my family. I have these very kind of strong memories of me shouting to my dad that I was a horrible person, and he was trying to leave for work and shouted through the door as he left, like he never wanted to hear me say that again. And just realizing, just although I was kind of hurting and in pain, my family were as well, because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to pull you back to yourself, and it must be so hard. So I feel the pain for Ivana, and also for her family as well, as they try and do the best for her. So this, I just can't imagine how sort of wonderful but also traumatizing this must have been to kind of pull together. So the first bit I want to talk about is just kind of in her author's note. It's quite a long passage, so do bear with me, but to cut anything out wouldn't be doing it justice. So she kind of talks about how a lot in here is quite harsh and quite dark, but she really feels it's important to fully explore that. We're afraid that if we show these ugly, unpalatable parts of ourselves, it will be too much for others. that nobody will love us and accept us, and we'll be left alone with only the worst parts of ourselves for company. So we don't let ourselves get too deep into self-hate, at least not in public. We hurry to slap on the happy ending and construct a heroic tale before the healing has even begun. The thing is, I don't believe this coping mechanism is the healthiest way of dealing with darkness. I've read articles depicting my life as a fairy tale, even as I sat at home consumed by darkness, and these stories only compounded my feelings of isolation and disillusionment. And what I found out is that darkness is not infinite. You do actually get to the other side of it, but first you have to submerge yourself in it. You have to stop skating above the surface of your depth. You have to confront and accept this darkness in order to heal from it. This is why there are parts of this book where I had to submerge myself and the reader in moments of utter desolation. Why I had to be honest about the moments where it felt like every light had gone out. I know that stories of eating disorders, such as the one I'm sharing in this book, can seem unendingly bleak, and therein lies our frenzied need to truncate the long road to recovery and rush to a place of positivity, a hearty commitment to self-love. But I think in doing so we gloss over the intense cruelty inherent within them. After all, the cruelty of eating disorders can literally starve a person to death. I found out when reading other stories similar to mine that the book often ends at the point where the person disassociates themselves from their disorder. They create a distance and step back, attributing all those dark, hateful thoughts neatly to this thing that's been identified as a sickness. But personally, I found that even after my fixation on food and controlling my body had gone away, that darkness was still present, and indeed had been there long before the eating disorder ever took residence in my mind. In so many ways, the anorexia was just a distraction, and both in my healing journey and in writing this book, I wanted to get to the bottom of that darkness. I wanted to unpack it and understand what really was beneath this compelling distraction. An addiction, not to thinness, but to negative thinking, to safety, to staying small in all ways so that I wouldn't have to deal with the terrifying reality of fully living life. I wanted to submerge myself in this darkness for this book and find this way through it, because ultimately I do actually believe in fairy tales. And I just thought that was such an important part of explaining how this book feels. Like, she really does go into each moment. But it's important that she does, and I just love how she explains that in the beginning. So I think that's a really good thing to know when you go into this book, that, you know, there might be hard bits to read, but it's important to kind of get to those and understand, and not paint a fluffy picture over the top of it, because I think that's what she's had to deal with in the press. Like, definitely when I first came to pick this book up, the way she spoke about why she wanted to write this was because the media would pull on certain parts of her story and kind of tie it up in a nice pretty bow as like a woohoo, this is amazing. Whereas she's like, that's not quite the truth. That's not how it happened. So this is her chance to be able to explain exactly what happened. So it was really fascinating to kind of meet her as a child and go through all her love of art. But this kind of fear as well that she had. She's always had this kind of inherent fear of sort of like growing up and who she is, and trying to find that person. And somewhere along that, this eating disorder started to manifest itself, and you slowly see how this begun as being a healthy thing and then suddenly kind of twisted to become not so much. And you also see that it's not just about your initial thought that it's like an addiction to thinness or an addiction to like not wanting to be fat. Or to wanting to look a certain way. I can't explain it, but when you read it, you can really see that in this book. So it is really hard reading, especially with kind of the way the medical side try and intervene and try and help. And even now, like, Ivana herself, like, doesn't have the answers for the best way for this. But she obviously has her own feelings about how it felt at the time and how it wasn't handled in the best way. So it is really hard to read those things, and how you can understand why she's fighting against people who are ultimately trying to help her, because they haven't quite got to the problem. So the kind of what the medical it's not community, it's the wrong word. Medical side do is they treat the symptoms of the eating disorder rather than looking at, you know, what was the cause of this. and it was quite traumatic, kind of how far she got into it. I've no idea on the current health system and how they help eating disorders, or what the way they go about is. And I think, you know, you need to make that decision yourself. If you know someone, or if you yourself or has been affected by eating disorders, read carefully, read at your own pace, read in your own time. I do think this book is a really good book to read. Like, I have no experience of it. I've had friends who have had eating disorders, and they were always very much more than their eating disorder. That was kind of like a small part of them that I didn't know how to help or how to address with them. One I've lost touch with, one I continue to know, and she is in a great place. I still have never discussed it completely with her. Maybe from reading this I will feel able to, but I know there were other things going on which I did discuss with her. But I do feel happy in myself that I definitely continue to focus on them as people, rather than try and help them with their eating disorder, which I would have no clue about how to do that. So I do think it is really important to kind of, obviously this is Ivana's journey. This is not going to be the same journey as someone else, but I think it's so good at giving an insight into what it's like and kind of her thought process and how she felt at the time. And I think the most important thing to take away from this is listening. Just listening to someone and giving them the ability to talk to you with no judgment or no fear. I think that is the absolute best thing that you can do, because talking with everything is just so important, because unless we talk to someone and try and see from their point of view, there's no way we're going to be able to understand them. So again, I want to read like another couple of extracts from this. This is as she's just about to, it's quite, I'd say it's about a quarter in. So we're a quarter in when we start really getting into kind of the medicalized side of her eating disorder. And again, this is just an illustration of her narrative voice. And I just want to share that with you to just kind of give you a taste of what the book feels like. It was the day of my class's annual school tour, where students forwent school uniforms and trekked around some family-run outdoor entertainment venue. Maybe a water sports park, but more likely a farm. Mindlessly munching through plump bags of gummy sweets as we stared blankly back into the glassy amber eyes of bearded goats. I wasn't exactly feeling ecstatic about the day ahead, or the increasingly arduous, exhausting uphill cycle to school before it. Every day was just so uncomfortable by now, so cold and tiring and socially awkward, and ultimately it came down to a choice between quietly following my parents to the hospital and slipping obediently into a starchy, unfamiliar bed, or the goats. For future reference, and to neatly summarise the message of this book if you want to avoid all pain and trauma and growth and change, always choose the goats. And I just enjoy her voice. I just enjoy how you hear her reflection in it, and how there is a spark of humour in there as well. And just how I just enjoy her writing style as well, like her language, you know, how she's made the book really come alive. I do think memoirs just have the ability that they could be really dry, they could just be related, but I just think how she spun it, I just really enjoy the way she kind of paints a picture of her feelings and her life and things, both in the present moment and also on reflection. And even reading like some of the darker moments of the medical setting, there is this kind of cynical, snarky, bitchy sort of voice that comes out, which is hilarious. There is also kind of like, there's people she likes and she doesn't like, that comes through as well. So even when you're kind of in the most traumatic moments of her life, she is still able to kind of provide some humour through the way she talks about things. And this is also quite a really important point as well, about understanding how, I'm going to say to kind of lump everyone together who's had no experience of eating disorders. If you have, then obviously you will be in a different position to someone like myself who's never experienced it. So we kind of have no idea what it's like, and will inadvertently do things that we think are helpful that are actually so unhelpful. And I found this really eye-opening, as well as just generally finding the way she speaks quite funny. The notion of being healthy was a commonly held fear among all the residents on the farm. So the farm is the word for a medical institution where they basically had to stay until they were well enough to leave. To us, words such as healthy, normal, better were absolutely synonymous with fat. We lit up over words like thin, shockingly, sickly, and emaciated, even deathly made us glow with pride. I can't stand when people tell me I'm looking well, Natalie moaned one evening, gripping her head in her hands as other girls in the circle nodded frantically. I was reminded with a twinge of guilt of my rosy-cheeked, well-intentioned dad at the weekend, clapping Natalie heartily on the back and telling her how well she looked as she responded with a weak smile. You have to stop telling everyone they look well, Dad, I chided him over the phone several days later. You're causing a secret exercise epidemic. Just little things like that. Oh, wrong bit. I just really enjoyed, and I use the word well as well. When I know that people have been ill, regardless of the cause and symptoms, so this is both medical and physical, and when I see them again, I heard so many people telling people that I know had sort of like mental health difficulties and had come back, and we'd kind of seen them again out and about, and they were very, very thin, like they'd lost a lot of weight. But I knew from my own experience that losing weight is sometimes down to stress, not an exercise healthy regime. So lots of people congratulating everyone on, oh, you're looking really thin, you really slimmed out. Not really what the message you want to be giving to someone, because they've lost weight really unhealthily because they are so stressed out or so sad or so poorly and dealing with it. So I don't really like that message. So I would always say to people, you're looking really well. You're looking, or, you're looking healthy. Or how are you feeling? Because sometimes they weren't looking well and I couldn't tell them they were. And most of the time, people seem to be looking well and healthy when they had been eating better and looked more, it was more the face. It was kind of more in your face rather than your body shape that kind of showed whether you were looking well and healthy or whether you weren't. So to hear that words like well and healthy, as much as I'm like disguising what I mean, falls absolutely flat. They know exactly what you mean. So I just found that really eye-opening. So within this, I think just very much there needs to be like a holistic approach to care of people with eating disorders. It's not just physical, it is also mental as well, and all of that needs to be kind of looked into and addressed. So I'm going to move on to the Harry Potter kind of part now. Hearing Ivana Lynch getting so excited about the Order of the Phoenix coming out, I could totally relate to that. I absolutely remember being so excited. This was when I started queuing at midnight for those books with my mum, and we had the best time. So seeing her level of excitement was amazing, and to just see how much it meant, like when she basically was at the lowest of the low, her only light, her only like pinnacle of hope was getting her hands on the new Harry Potter book and going physically to the bookshop and getting it. It's such a huge part of this. It's so kind of interwoven with things that she enjoys and things that she likes in this book, and I can't talk about it without not talking about those. And as a Harry Potter fan, I found those moments a real highlight and I really loved them. She also wrote a fan letter to JK Rowling. You see her connection to the character Luna Lovegood in here and like how she meant so much to her. And I remember watching interviews with Ivana Lynch on the television and hearing and seeing that she was a big fan of the books and she was a big fan of the character Luna. And I remember when all of that casting was announced and things, that I thought that was so beautiful. I just thought that it was so wonderful that she had such a connection with this character and then got to play her. I just thought that was amazing. So it was really lovely to kind of like see all that come out in here. And it was wonderful to see how much she relished receiving that she sent a fan letter to JK Rowling and she got a reply back. And that was a really amazing moment for her. She was able to be kind of open and honest with her about her eating disorders and got a really great message of support back. And although that was wonderful and supportive, just like everyone else, JK Rowling, like the rest of us, still doesn't understand what it is like to have an eating disorder. And as much as you can be helpful and kind of want that person to get better and give them all the good advice and the positivity to do that, it's still something that Ivana needs to unpick and explore herself. And I think unless you've been affected by it, or really, really understand it and have a lot of experience of working with people and talking with people who have got it, not just trying to shove a load of food down them, but actually like their emotional psyche, it's not going to make a huge impact. So like there's more to it than just wanting to get better and trying to get better. There's a lot more that needs unpacking. And she was so, well, I don't know how things would have gone if she didn't, but there was an absolutely fantastic counsellor who was someone who's recovered from an eating disorder that really, really supported Ivana in her really long journey of like trying to discover what happened and kind of be in a much better sort of like mental and healthy position. So it was really lovely reading all those moments in here, and just how important sort of like this holistic approach is. I also really enjoyed as we kind of go further on in the book, and Ivana ends up going for interviews and going through lots of processing to get the part of Luna. There's a moment when she's kind of on set for kind of the first time in like a screen test as like a final kind of bit before she gets the role. I really, really enjoyed this as a Harry Potter fan. I found it great. So I'm just going to share this with you as well. So this is there. So this is kind of like in the final quarter of the book. We work through the scenes moment by moment, pausing every now and then. I'm going to start again. We work through the scenes moment by moment, pausing every now and then between takes to huddle again and mine for a deeper truth, the subtlest moments of understanding. These huddles are where I want to spend my whole life, I think, gathered together with other curious souls, unravelling stories and discussing the secret inner lives of beloved characters, like children in the playground inventing fantasy lands in whispers behind our hands, while the adults work diligently around us, erecting the scaffolding and making the world safe to explore. Between scenes, I drift over to the producer Davids, asking them how they intend to create Thestrals, where they stand on the Snape is good/evil debate, and whether they've been told the ending to the final book. David Heyman speaks with captivating passion about the books, keenly, what's a word I don't know, cognizant? I'm going to go with cognizant. Keenly cognizant of every minute detail of the magical world that I mention, and he gives compassionate explanations for why they had to cut precious moments from the books like SPEW and Winky and Sir Cadogan. Silently, I vow to never again bitch about the filmmakers' editorial choices on the MuggleNet fan forums. Again, I feel very much like I relate to that, because as a teenager I would dissect the films and be like, why didn't they include this? Why didn't they include that? Why did they do this? I do still do that, but I think it must be amazing to have that time to be able to talk with other creatives about their choices and how they've decided to do things and why they've made the decisions they do. And yes, I was one of those people that when the Lord of the Rings films came out in their box sets, I would sit and watch all the extended editions to find out why they made those choices for the script, why they deviated from this, what they were trying to show. And it's fascinating because film is such a different media to stories, and I really enjoy hearing about the choices and things they make. So yeah, I can very much again relate to Ivana on that point. So yeah, continuing with this throughout all of the Harry Potter filming and then beyond, I really started to pick up the pace with my reading because I really wanted to know where this ended. Like, was she going to slip back? How did she kind of like get to kind of that fulfillment, holistic approach? So it was, I think it was really well done. Like, we continuing like talking about her relationship with her family, her career, her life as she kind of moves on from the Harry Potter days, and just her relationship with her body and with her negative thinking as well. So yes, if you were wondering whether or not you should pick this up and read it, if any of the things I've mentioned sounds interesting to you, then obviously, yes, pick this book up. I had such a great time with it. And again, I'm just going to reiterate, just go at your pace. You know, there are really hard things in here. There are probably really triggering things, especially depending on what your life experience is. So just read it carefully, put it down, pick it up when you want to. I just think you just need to be kind to yourself with this type of book. And one thing I noticed literally just as I was making the video, I didn't notice before on the front cover, but the butterflies here are all pinned. They've got the pins in them like you see in those historical natural history museum things. But on the cover, look, no pins, they're all flying free. Just quite enjoyed that. So there we go. So now we're going to see what the next book that I am going to read for my career. The next subject that I need to study is an O in law. So level O is Aldea's regional anthropology. And that means I have got to read a book which is the colours of my country's flag. So for law, I've got to read a book that are the same colours as my country's flag. I live in England, the flag is white and red, and I have gone for Get a Life Chloe Brown. We have a white cover, we've got red writing, Chloe's wearing a red top. There's also little bits of blue as well, so if I was feeling British or UK-ish, then I could also include that too. So this is a contemporary romance by Talia Hibbert, and it's been on my list for a really long time to read, and I have never read it. I don't read a lot of romance, so I was really keen. I'm really looking forward to having like a much lighter book after reading the memoir. So I have read the prologue and I've read chapter 1. Again, I love the narrative voice. I'm so excited. It's had me sort of chuckling as in the prologue she talks about why she feels the need to get a life. And we get a glimpse of like her family in that as well. And in chapter 1, we're introduced to both the main characters. Well, we've already been introduced to Chloe in the prologue, but we get a sort of point of view from Red's perspective, and then we get a point of view from Chloe's perspective as well. And I really enjoy how, let me find the bit in here, we have got this little line drawing of a little cat curled up. And that is just used to break the two different perspectives off. So we get Red's perspective, then we have the little cat, and then we get Chloe's perspective. So they both clearly have life accumulated baggage that I feel is going to be like unpicked and explored as the book progresses. They also very clearly have chemistry as well. I'm really getting that feeling as they're like sniping at each other in the small snippet where they were together. I'm just really excited to kind of read this. I'm just getting such a really fun vibe from it. As well as the cat, I also want to talk about right at the beginning, before you start reading the prologue, you get an author's note here. And it just talks about some trigger warnings that you might experience while reading this. And I really appreciate that. I think it's a great thing to kind of have at the front of the book. It's very, very fast paced. And it feels, I want to say, sparky, because like the dialogue is really snappy. The internal voice of both Chloe and Red, it just keeps making me giggle, and I just want to keep on reading. So I'm feeling really good about this book. I think I'm really, really gonna love it. So I'm gonna turn off now and get back to my book. So thanks for watching. Do have a little chat down below if you've got any thoughts about either of these two books, if you want to tell me what you're reading for the Magical Read Along, or just what you're reading in general. And if you don't have anything that you want to say, then do feel free to do a little emoji. And as I've been talking about the opposite of butterfly hunting, let's go for a butterfly. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and happy reading.